Hydrogen has been touted as the fuel of the future, more specifically of India's green future, because green hydrogen and its potential to transform the country and move towards the net zero emission target by 2070 is what we're going to talk about today on Mad About Markets. Hi Manglam.
Hi Ritu, and the biggest risk that the world is facing right now is climate change.
No doubt, always on top of mind.
Always on top of mind. So let's talk about that. To address concerns around climate change itself, reducing emissions and accelerating decarbonization efforts is non-negotiable, and low carbon hydrogen is expected to play a central role in this decarbonization effort that we're taking across the globe. So, that's exactly what we've got to discuss today.
But, is green hydrogen really the hero of net zero? Here's what Prime Minister Narendra Modi had to say.
भारत आज जो भी कार्य कर रहा है उसमें सबसे बड़ा लक्ष्य है जो भारत को क्लाइमेट जंप देने वाला है, क्लाइमेट के क्षेत्र में क्वांटम जंप देने वाला है, वो है ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन का क्षेत्र। अमृतकाल में हमें भारत को ग्रीन हाइड्रोजन के प्रोडक्शन और एक्सपोर्ट का ग्लोबल हब बनाना है।
Well, you heard it from the Prime Minister himself. Now, the latest buzzword in the world of global green energy is Green H2 111. And no, that is not really the name of a science fiction movie at all. But what it does denote is simply global energy aspirations of achieving $1 for 1 kilo of green hydrogen within 1 decade. So that is what 111 is. Now, green hydrogen is hydrogen which is produced by splitting water into hydrogen and oxygen, but using renewable electricity. So when it burns, it emits no exhaust, only water, which makes it one of the cleanest fuels that we can have access to today.
All right, thank you for the chemistry lesson. But let's talk about that itself. Based on the source material and production process, there are basically 4 main forms of hydrogen. There's brown-black hydrogen from coal. There's grey hydrogen, which comes in from natural gas. Blue hydrogen is, emerges from fossil fuels, and green hydrogen is the one that is derived from renewable energy. Now, over 90% of hydrogen production in today's day and age comes in from fossil fuels, and the end products of many of these hydrogen applications are heavy carbon dioxide emitters. This is why green hydrogen can actually become a big game changer, Ritu.
You know what studies show? They actually show that adoption of green hydrogen can enable India to abate, and guess this, 3.6 gigatons of carbon dioxide emissions cumulatively between now and 2050. And the energy import savings financially as well from green hydrogen can range from anywhere between $246 to $358 billion during the same period. So just how big a market can green hydrogen be? Well, as per a Niti Aayog report, the cumulative value of the green hydrogen market in India could actually be $8 billion by 2030 and to $340 billion by 2050. We'll get to the contribution of green hydrogen overall in just a bit.
Well, Ritu, since you've spoken about how big the market is, how big the potential is, let's also get in our guests on the show now. We have an elite panel, so to say. We have with us Seshagiri Rao, who's the Group CFO of JSW Steel, joining us. Also with us is Arne Ballantyne, who's the co-founder and CEO of Ohmium. And we also have with us on the program Hemant Malia, who's the energy lead of Council on Energy, Environment and Water, which is a public policy think tank based out of Delhi itself. Thanks a lot for joining in. Let's go across to Mr. Rao first. Mr. Rao, what is the kind of potential that you see in the green hydrogen space?
Green hydrogen, I think, is the only route to decarbonize the Indian economy. So there is a great opportunity as far as India is concerned, because renewable energy we will be able to produce at much lower cost than what the world is producing. So with that, there is a great opportunity. Right now, India is consuming around 6 million tons of hydrogen. If we look at the sectors where the demand can come up in near future, this demand will substantially increase. So that is the opportunity which we are seeing as a group in hydrogen. So first, renewable capacity we are increasing in a substantial way in JSW Energy. Thereafter, we are looking at producing green hydrogen using the renewables, and then seeing how that can be used in the steel making, in our steel making process. and also to see that it can be sold in the market. That is the kind of roadmap we are seeing in future.
Well, thanks for that, Mr. Rao. But Mr. Ballantyne, or Arnie, let me call you that. What is the size of the India market for green hydrogen? You know, you're, of course, one of the first players in the country to set up the electrolyzer manufacturing plant, which will actually help produce green hydrogen. Because, you know, we have various estimates. Niti Aayog, for instance, says it will be an $8 billion market by 2030.
I think it's, you know, for India, that could be a good number. But I also think there's a potential for it to be much larger. An example of how that could be. The European Union has targets to reach 20 million tons per year by the end of 2030. If you convert that into gigawatts and then look at the economic stimulation that would create wherever that equipment is built and wherever those plants are installed in Europe, you can see how if some portion of that hydrogen were to come from India, just using this one example, it's easy to go past that $8 billion number.
Well, hold your thoughts, gentlemen. We spoke about the opportunity, but let's also talk about where this demand is really going to come for this green hydrogen that we're talking about. Well, an International Energy Association report, or IEA report, says that the declining prices of hydrogen, coupled with the growing urgency for decarbonization, means that the global demand for hydrogen could actually grow by almost 400% by 2050, and that is going to be led by industry and transportation needs. The end users of hydrogen, now those range from industrial processes in iron and steel, plants to transportation for fuel for light-duty vehicles, for the power sector, for chemical feedstock as well, as for the production of ammonia, methane, and so on. So lots of end users for hydrogen overall.
Yep, but that's the global picture. Let's talk about in India itself. Hydrogen demand could actually grow more than fourfold by 2050, representing almost 10% of the global hydrogen demand. As per the Council on Energy, Environment as well as Water, or we know it as CEEW, the demand for H2 or hydrogen could actually grow from 6 million tons to about 30 million tons by 2050. In that, the share of green hydrogen could actually grow from 16% all the way up to 94%. Ritu did speak about this, right? So let's talk about this itself. In 2050, this number could be as big as $340 billion, become the largest source of hydrogen in the long term, replacing both grey-brown hydrogen itself. So that is the potential that we're talking about here.
Yes, 94% of all the hydrogen consumed. That is a big number. Hemant, let me come to you on that note. What are the end users of hydrogen, and are they limited by constraining factors for green hydrogen at the moment?
So the end users right now are refineries and refinery petrochemical and then fertilizer plants because they're already using hydrogen, albeit it's grey hydrogen. In addition to that, we do have technologies that are budding where you can take the hydrogen and combine it with CO2, which is essential right now to meet our 1.5 degree climate goals, and then produce fuels. Right, so you can produce anywhere from sustainable aviation fuel or biodiesel. You can produce methanol, etc., or also ammonia, which is now being considered for shipping industry. So you can convert hydrogen into these fuels. You can also convert hydrogen into petrochemicals. So a lot of nutraceuticals, or for that matter, chemicals that are already in use, can be produced from green hydrogen. And then finally, in the mobility space, although EV is something that is taking traction, but when you look at heavy-duty vehicles, the 30 and 40-tonner trucks and large buses and long haul, then it becomes difficult to haul the batteries along with it. And so hydrogen might find applications, especially once the cost comes down. Now, as far as the demand side is concerned, really, it depends on where the application is. For refineries and petrochemicals and fertilizer plants, the barrier is very low because you're replacing hydrogen with hydrogen. However, something like aviation fuel, or for that matter, green ammonia for bunkering, there's a need for technology deployment as well as infrastructure. So that means, additional finance that comes along with it.
All right. And Mr. Rao, what about you? Do you see enough demand for green H2? I mean, would you need more assurances before you invest heavily in this space? What's your thought on that?
The green hydrogen policy that has been announced by Government of India, I think there are some incentives which are being envisaged to incentivize the industry to produce green hydrogen and also to supply. So basically, the major challenges in terms of overall production of green hydrogen is concerned, the electrolyzers availability and the cost of electrolyzers. And the second is the transportation infrastructure, refueling station. There is a huge amount of capex that is required in that. So if you want to really create demand in the user industries and also make them to transition towards use of green hydrogen, replacing existing fossil fuel-based energy, then what is required is the infrastructure creation. I think their industry definitely look forward to the government to create that infrastructure by incentivizing either private sector or under PPP model or by the government itself. This is very much essential to attract the industry to transition towards green hydrogen.
Take your point, Mr. Rao. You know, there is a lot of investment required for it, and there are incentives coming as well. In fact, keeping the potential of green hydrogen in mind, the government of India has announced a green hydrogen policy in February itself of this year. It's aimed at boosting domestic production of green hydrogen to 5 million tons by 2030, make India an export hub for clean fuel as well. It proposes to offer 25 years of free power transmission for green hydrogen producers and a single portal for all clearances required for setting up green hydrogen production. Also, there is a facility for producers to bank any surplus renewable energy that they have generated with DISCOMs for up to 30 days and use it as required. But for green hydrogen to really take off, producers also need to see an improvement in the cost economics, Ritu, because it is expensive.
Yeah, it is a very capital-intensive process, and that's exactly what Mr. Rao from JSW was telling us about. Actually, as for estimates which have been done by KPMG, the cost of green hydrogen is almost double of what you get from the cheaper alternatives like grey hydrogen. So it costs anywhere between 320 to 330 rupees per kilogram to produce green hydrogen, and compare this to other forms, about 160 to 200 rupees per kg for grey hydrogen. However, the analysis by this KPMG also suggests that green hydrogen costs in India could potentially half, fall to as low as 160 to 170 per kilogram by 2030, which will bring some parity with grey hydrogen and other fossil fuels, thanks to some of these policy measures that have been announced.
Well, beyond supply and demand, a robust market for green hydrogen would also translate to a growing demand for production and consumption technologies. India's own internal market for electrolyzers could actually grow from around $5 billion in 2030 to $31 billion by 2050 itself, which represents a demand of close to around 226 gigawatts.
Well, let me ask that to Mr. Rao, because, since you are looking at producing green hydrogen, what are the cost estimates for production, and do you expect it to come down over time?
Cost of production of green hydrogen, it depends upon at what cost the renewable power is available. So the renewable power today is in the range of 2 rupees to 3 rupees per unit. If it is 2 rupees per unit, then the second element of cost is capital cost of electrolyzers and the capacity utilization of electrolyzers. These two are also very important factors in determining what would be the cost of hydrogen. So assuming that the electrolyzer cost will become competitive in future, as on date it is expensive. And if we take these two costs under control, I think it is possible to achieve, if not $1, below $2 the hydrogen cost per kg.
All right, Mr. Rao, on that note, we'll ask you to just hang in there for a bit. We'll take a short break, and as we do that, on the other side, we will also take a look at how India's giant corporates are actually hitching their wagon to the green hydrogen dream.
And as always, we're going to do the yays and the mays, and of course ask the bigger question, and that is, can India's green future be built on hydrogen? That and more in just a bit.